I would want you to hear that there's nothing wrong with you, that what you've done has been an incredibly effective way to keep yourself safe. But now that thing that has kept you safe is getting in the way of who it is that you potentially could be. And who you potentially could be is somebody that can handle the things that you've been scared of. Hey, Chance, can you turn the music down out there?
Yeah, I sure can.
Just a little bit. It's all good. We're just about to start recording. Just going to give you a heads up.
Yes, sir.
Okay, love you.
He didn't say it back, dude.
No, I hung out before
Oh.
he could hurt my feelings.
Ready when you
Okay,
are.
can I start going?
You can start.
So I'll start with the story. And do you remember the show Dragnet? Y'all probably don't know what Dragnet is. Dragnet was like the first cop show on television. My dad used to watch like Andy Griffith, Gomer Pyle, and on that channel, it's Channel 7 in Terrell, I don't know what it is the rest of the world. There's a show called Dragnet. In the beginning of every episode, it said the stories are real, but the names have been changed to protect the innocent. So this story's real, but I'm going to change some of the details so this person can remain anonymous. And this story, even though it's specific and it is a real person, I think is very general. And as you listen to this, I want you to imagine maybe a scenario that's more real to you. But let's say that all of us are there together and we have this client. And this client is a female. She's in her mid-40s. She is and this isn't a value judgment, it's just a fact. She's 30 to 40 pounds overweight. She's coming to you because she wants to lose weight. Pretty straightforward. You two have sat down. We've all sat down as a group, and we've decided that this is something that she cares about, and she has good reasons for why she cares about it. She knows that to set an example to other people that she really wants to lose this weight. And she has also, which is an important ingredient of goal setting, she's put the impetus on herself. That means like she's not saying that this is a goal that somebody else can accomplish, but it's her own actions and behaviors that is going to accomplish the goal. You guys determine some strategies that you can do that will get her closer to the goal. And are you ready for it? Nothing happens. She doesn't do what she says that she will do. However, it looks like she's motivated. It looks like she's not blowing smoke up your butt. She's not saying like, I'll do it, but then she doesn't really care. Like, she came to you. This is a goal that she has teased out that's really important to her, but she doesn't do it. That scenario, I think, is really common. In the fitness world, I think there's a bad rap that coaches get, and it's something that annoys me to no depth, that a trainer, a coach, is painted as somebody that's not a deep thinker, painted as like a meathead. I mean, there's all these terms: gym rat, meathead, like somebody that's incapable of deep thinking. And most of the people that I've met that are in this industry are not like that. They're not idiots. They care deeply for people, but yet the stereotype still exists. And this is why I think the stereotype exists. It's because they are applying a thought process to goal setting that has worked for them that will not work for most people. And I'll explain. When any of us, and just for the record, we're in a gym right now. So if you hear like somebody screaming, no one's in trouble. If you hear like loud music, we're not at a rock concert. We're in the back of a gym. But back to what we were talking about. When you think of your own life, if you are a coach, and that is who this podcast is for, there's probably things that you were ignorant about, that you got educated about, and then you just did them. Like that was your process. That was your algorithm for accomplishing goals. I don't know how to eat. I'll learn how to eat, and then I just eat better. Hey, I'm overweight. I figured out how to train, and now I'm not overweight. And so you apply that to everybody and you say, well, clearly this is how it worked for me, so it's also how it will work for everyone else. And what you are basing that assumption on is that what the limiting factor is that people are lazy. That's what you're saying is true. That if I can educate you and if I can motivate you, then that should be enough. Now, before we started shooting, we were talking about, hey, if you were to receive a bad diagnosis from a physician, surely that would be enough motivation to change. And what's interesting is that I've done that research. And you would think like, man, if you've been told that you have some life-altering condition, that would be enough motivation. There isn't anything that could be more motivating than to say like, hey, if you don't change your ways, you're going to die. But if we had 10 people, the research shows that like 2 would actually fall through. So if that's true, there's something else going on. And I think from our own insecurities as coaches, maybe a lack of an alternative, when someone, that nice lady that I was describing, sits across from you and you've given them something that's very clear and actionable and they don't do it, I know what goes on in your head because it's gone on in my head as well. This person doesn't really want it. This person's lazy. This person's full of shit. And because of that, the stereotype of a coach is that you're only going to deal with people that can do things exactly the same way that you can do them. And so I want to posit an alternative that it's not just laziness, but that there's something else going on. There's a concept that's happening across lots of different industries, and it's called a root cause dysfunction. And that's to say that what we see on the surface isn't really the mechanism that's making that thing happen. It's to say that if we can see like this little iceberg above the surface of the water, there's potentially a much larger part of the iceberg that's below. To use that iceberg analogy, and I'll try to riff off of that, the part that's above the water only requires you to swim to. The part that's below the water requires you to scuba dive. It's a different skill set. So you could be the world's best exercise instructor, and if we equate that to swimming, it's like, man, you could be a world-class breaststroker, but it's not necessarily the same skill set that you would need to go on to this spirited inquiry to figure out like what's missing here. And so back to this person that hypothetically is sitting across from us. I want to give you a little more color and context because I think it will support this notion that it's not just a motivation thing. We don't need to say like, well, she just doesn't want it bad enough. There's something else going on. And here's why. To say that somebody doesn't want it bad enough, to say that they have no motivation, you would want to test that out. You would want to see that that person has no motivation across all areas of their life. And if they have been disciplined in something, and if they have been motivated in some way, then you can't say that they're not a motivated person. This person, true story, was the first female named partner at a law firm in town, and she went to Harvard for law school. Let that sit in for just a sec. You can't tell me that this person doesn't know how to do hard things and that she's not okay being in an uncomfortable situation. She's a G, but there's something about this particular thing that doesn't add up with the rest of her life. If you look at the rest of her life, she's incredibly successful across all domains. She's a great friend. She's a great mother. She's obviously world-class at what she does professionally, but she's overweight. So there's something else going on. And so if it's not laziness, and clear with this person, we can't say that that's true, what else could it be? My hypothesis, my thesis, and I will support this, is that it's fear. It's a fear that doesn't live anywhere that you can swim to. It's a fear that you got to scuba dive to. Now, another pointless story is when I was in college, you had to take an elective. Was it like that for y'all? Mm-hmm. What did you take?
I think mine was like physical education. It aligned with I guess like at the time, I get was it like your associates or just like your prereqs?
Yeah, like your associates. Like I took golf and yoga my freshman year.
Yeah, dude, we had like ping pong and like a bunch of
It's just like random
pointless
classes you need
stuff
to
that
take
just
to
took
be
up
able to-
time.
Amazing.
FAFSA was just collecting.
Amazing. And you can't see him, but Caleb and Isaiah, who helped do the podcast, are on here with me. So we'll probably be hearing voices without seeing faces. Yeah, A&M was the same way, where it's like, wild stuff that you could take. And one was scuba diving. And I was like, oh, well, that's cool because I have to take this. Two, my parents are paying for it. And you can get scuba certified like through the process. And I thought that was cool because, it's like a Navy SEAL component and, like a James Bond, aspect to it. Have y'all ever scuba dived? It's different than you think.
It's scary.
It's scary. It's
respect
scary.
water.
Like all the sexy stuff that you see, there's like a lot of boring and really unpleasant things about it. The one that's at the top of the list for me would be the pressurizing, right? When you go down, you have to clear, and you have to go really slow. You have to go really slow when you go down because of the pressure, and you have to go really slow when you come back up, or like, weird things can happen. So I use that analogy because to go through this process, you can't go as fast as you can. To go through this process, you're clearing and you're going deeper, but you're blind. Like the other person is the one that can see the things that are going on. And when I talk about stuff that's outside the realm of traditional like fitness, the number one pushback I get is like, hey, I'm not a counselor. I can't have these conversations. And I want to say that you're not writing a script for Prozac. you're not telling somebody to go like divorce their spouse and like irrevocably change their life. This is the only thing you're doing. You're just asking questions. You're just creating a path that the client is actually going to, it's almost like you're mopping backwards. And eventually they're going to have mopped themselves into a corner and you'll arrive at the thing that they needed to arrive at. You're not doing much of any consulting here. There might be some brainstorming, but I want to calm those worries of the person that says, oh, I'm a fitness coach and I can't have this conversation. All you need is a good attitude. You need to have trust with that person, which means that they have confidence that your intentions are the best for them. And you just got to ask these questions that I'm about to lay out for you. That's it. You don't need a PhD to ask these questions. And so we're going to go through it. I hope this makes sense. I have the fellas on here that if I say something that needs some clarification, that they'll speak up. I want to say that I'm indebted to the work of Laura Leahy and Richard Keegan. These aren't completely thoughts of my own. I'm going to make it sound cooler than what they did, but I didn't make up any of this stuff. So you have somebody here, and you can tell that their desire is genuine, but their behaviors are completely contrary to what they said that they want. Number one, clarify what it is that they said that they want. And this needs to be something that's actionable, not this big, vague concept of like, I want to be healthy. It's like, no. Tell me the thing that you want to get better at. Remind me. We'll call her Jennifer. Jennifer, remind me of the thing that you want to get better at. And they'll tell you, and let's say in this specific context, that she starts to list these behaviors that she know will allow her to lose weight. Hey, I want to get better at eating the right foods. I want to get better at cooking my own meals. I want to get better at exercising on a regular basis. All the things that you and I know are exactly what you do to be healthy. She starts listing those things out. The next part of that first question, why is that important to you? I like to ask, hey, on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being extremely important, 1 meaning it's something you read in a book, like what is it for you? And you want that number to be high. If it's low, it's just an abstract concept. It's not something that they really believe that they need. They're just saying it because they think you want to hear it. So you want it to be a goal that is actionable. There's actually behaviors that they could be doing. That's what we're talking about. Secondly, you want to make sure that it's really important to them. And then lastly, and this is just a the silver lining, the fine print, you want to make sure that the way that they talk about it is something that they can actually control. Sometimes I'm sitting across from somebody, and this is another real person, real story. I want to show up to my 20-year reunion, and I want to make their jaws drop. It's like, hey, you can't actually control how someone reacts to you having lost weight. You can't actually control that. And so the goal needs to be something that you are implicitly in charge of. So if we change that, it'd be like, hey, I want to show up feeling like I'm as healthy as I possibly can be. It's totally within your control. You can't control somebody else's reaction. So that's number one. There may be a few things that they write out. That's great. Make a little list. We love having moleskins and pins so people can actually see that versus just like the words being spoken and they disappear. So we encourage people to write this out as well. Now, that's a pretty easy question. Most people, if you've had some type of consultative process, you probably had that question already out in the air. They know that. Question number 2, what are you doing or not doing that undermines that goal? What are you doing or not doing that undermines that goal? So, hey, this is what I said I want to do. Now, and this one's also a little easier. We're starting to clear our nose. We're starting to go a little bit deeper. We can still see the surface. We can still see the boat up atop. It's not that scary. And really, some of this stuff has probably come up as well. Hey, yeah, I actually am not cooking a lot of my meals. I'm not making it into the gym as much as I say that I was going to. I'm binging. I'm eating these foods that I know aren't good for me. And so we're just listing all of those things out. We're listing everything that we're doing. We're listing the things that potentially we said that we would do and that we're not doing. And as they start to list that out, make sure that it's exhaustive as much as they can. And in this process, you're starting to slow them down. You're starting to pull them into a more contemplative space and into a deeper thought process. As they start to, and I've seen this happen a lot, as they start to list the things out that they're doing that they shouldn't be doing, shut the hell up. Don't say anything. Your tendency, and sometimes theirs, I've seen this happen, is you start to correct it. It's like, oh, well, yeah, I mean, if I'll make sure that I order Snap Kitchen so I can eat healthy foods. People will start to correct those because it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to list some of the things that they're doing that, aren't exactly the most positive behaviors that they're doing in a day. But just let it sit. They need to be aware of that, because if we interrupt the connection of where we go next, it'll be really hard on the spot for them to arrive at the next conclusion that they have. And the next question is, if these things you just listed out that you know you're not supposed to do, but you do, if you imagined doing the opposite of those behaviors you just listed, what fears or worries come up for you? What fears or worries come up for you? Now, usually when you're connected to some things that you don't like, to say, hey, you don't get to do those anymore, I've noticed that the answers are sometimes readily available. People just don't want to say them. But there's no wrong moves here. Sometimes, and this person that I'm talking about, Jennifer, so to speak, she was like, no fears, no worries at all. Like I feel pretty good about those things. And you know what? I just need to try harder. We're just going to get in there. We're just going to do it. That was her answer. And I said, well, let's come back. I want you to think about it. And And I want you to, just sit with that for a while. Looks like we've got about as far as we could get today. Let's go and pick it back up the next time that we meet. Before she left, she did talk about how great it would feel to fit back into some of her clothes that she wore in college. And she went home that night, and as a way to get herself excited, she started to pull out some of those clothes. And as she pulled out some of those clothes, she realized how far away from that size that she currently was. There were some clothes that she had. She had a belly button ring in college. So she had like some shirts, she raised her arms up. It's like, she could show off the belly button ring. We're talking ring too, not a stud. So that tells you the age that she was in college. Anyways, by bringing all these clothes up, she realized that when she was younger, she had really prioritized how she looked. And as certain things had happened in her life, the direction that she took is that she wanted to be taken more seriously, especially as a female. And so what she found out is that if she did the thing that she said was her goal, in other words, if she did the opposite of all the bad behaviors that she was currently doing, it would mean to her that she couldn't take herself seriously. That's what she came up with. So her fear was not being taken seriously. And what that means is that if she was too consumed with her appearance, if she was too consumed with how she looked, then she couldn't take her career seriously enough, that she wouldn't be looked at as a true professional by all the men that predominantly the law firm had in there. Furthermore, she told me that when she looked at the secretaries that wore, kind of revealing clothes, that she also looked down upon them. She looked down upon them as people that didn't take their job seriously, and that they were too consumed with their visual appearance and that they didn't have substance as a female. So let's pause right there for a sec. Let's say that you didn't understand any of that about this person. Let's go back to the typical strategy of goal setting. Would any amount of me telling her to try harder or get more motivated help her with that thing? No. Furthermore, you could say that what she was doing currently was a brilliant way to keep herself from feeling something that she did not want to feel. So when we look at this person, we say, man, she's 30 pounds overweight, must not be very disciplined. This was a brilliant human being that had come up with very effective and disciplined ways of never feeling like she had no substance. It's heartbreaking and it's like beautiful at the same time. So back to our questions. The first one, you figure out what is the thing that we said we care about. Number 2, what are you doing instead of that? Number 3, if I took that away from you, what would you feel? What are the things that you would be afraid of would happen? What would you be really worried about? In this context with Jennifer, she wanted to lose weight. She was doing a bunch of things that kept her from losing weight. She was doing that to protect herself from feeling like the person that she didn't actually want to feel like. That took no effort from me at all. I didn't do a damn thing but ask her 3 questions. She came up with all that on her own. And all I was doing was listening, being curious. Oh, what does that mean? Hey, why do you care about that? And to understand what that is, the fears and worries leads us to the good stuff. If we're scuba diving, this is the deepest part. This is the murky water where neither one of us can see anything. We're just feeling around. But the question is, what are the hidden commitments that you have to yourself? Since you don't want to feel this way, what have you committed to yourself that you will do? And in the case of Jennifer, I've committed that I won't do anything that makes me feel anything like a superficial woman. So she was incapable of following through with some of those behaviors because it didn't fit into the identity that she had as a named partner of this law firm and a really smart, educated woman. And so the last question is, what's the big assumption there? Because there's an image. Before we get to the big assumption, there's an image. There's a dreaded image that as you ask these questions, it is conjured up. And for her, when she was younger, she could tell that guys were only looking at her and only talking to her because of the way that she looked. And so the dreaded image of her is that she would step into a work-related event. And if she was the right weight, if she had clothes on that accentuated her figure, if she had makeup on, then she would be right back to that way of feeling when she was 21 years old. So she had made a commitment to herself. It was hidden, but she had made a commitment that said, hey, I'm never going to feel like that again. And she was really good at holding herself to that commitment. So this person that on the surface would be like, oh, they don't want it bad enough. She's the exact opposite of that. He was dialed into that. She had no understanding of that's what was going on. Now from there, that's all theoretical. My my daughter came in the other day, and we were talking about this is going to be random. We were talking about time travel. And she was like, yeah, time machines don't exist. And I was like, well, there are people that believe that time travel is possible. She was like, word? I was like, yeah. Einstein. She's like, Daddy, Einstein's not real. I was like, what? No. That's a real person. She's like, no, he's got a green face. Like, that's only at Halloween. I know that's a made-up character. And it took us a couple of minutes of us arguing back and forth to realize that she thought I was talking about Frankenstein. Not Frankenstein, but Einstein. Einstein said that if he had an hour to save the world, he would take 55 minutes to make sure he understood what the problem was, and then the last 5 minutes he would figure out the solution. I think it's very much like this right here. It's a lot of time spent just figuring out like what's going on. And then the last few minutes is like, well, what do we do from here? And we're so prone to action that it's easy to like skip through a lot of this. And in that second step, it's like, oh, I'll just stop all these bad behaviors. Or you even get to some of the, feelings of, worry and fear. And you can tell yourself, well, I'll just stop feeling that way. But you have to get to this last step, which is to say, I am believing something. I am believing something that I think is absolutely true. And your job as the coach, your job as the facilitator is to challenge that. And all it is to say, hey, you might be right. Jennifer, you might be right that no female can be taken seriously if it looks on the outside as if they only care about their looks. But there's a possibility that you might be wrong. And just entering into that conversation that there's a possibility that that's not 100% true is where the action starts to creep in. Now, the tendency for us, as I said before, is to go right into changing behaviors. But this whole process of going down deep and now we're coming back up to the surface is to change what it is that we believe about what we saw at the bottom. It's not to come up and start doing all these different things, not just yet. But if we can change our beliefs, we can change our behaviors. That's the whole point of this. Now, let's take that example here and we'll tie a little bow on it, and then we can talk about some other things. Is there any person, Jennifer, that you can think of that is in good shape and is also taken seriously as an attorney? The answer was yes. Can you think of anyone that's in your exact same position across the nation that simultaneously is taken seriously and takes good care of themselves? The answer was yes. Then we have to test some of those big assumptions. And some of those big assumptions are, I can't be taken seriously. There's no way that I could dress a certain way and men talk to me the right way. And so we did some easy experiments. And one experiment was, I want you to wear something that you feel really pretty in. And I want you to go up to the secretaries, and I want you to go up to the named partners, and I want you to bring attention to the clothes that you have on. And I want you to see how they react. And if there's anybody that still takes you seriously, then it means that that assumption that all the time no one takes you seriously isn't actually true. And that didn't land exactly like we wanted to the first time. But the point here is that we kept trying, we kept iterating, we kept doing little experiments to field test some of these assumptions. And it came back that the assumption just wasn't actually true. And then from there, you just start to work your way back. Like, hey, if this thing I believe isn't always true, what does that mean about these hidden commitments that I've had to myself? It's like, well, I don't have to have them. If I don't have to have these hidden commitments to myself, then these bad behaviors, they actually seem silly. They seem unjustified. And if the bad behaviors seem unjustified, then it'll become much more doable to actually lean into the thing that we said that we cared about that's on the surface. You know, I'll give an example where I don't have to change the names or the circumstances. I'll just talk about myself, and it's not fitness related, but I think all of us can look at something in our life and say, man, there's something going on here. I'm stuck and I don't know why. And for me in the past, it's actually been improved around managing money. I'll say some things, some words will come out of my mouth like, yeah, I'm just not good with money. And if you heard that, you'd be like, well, yeah, that kind of checks out. It goes with this personality. But there's something that's a lot deeper there. There's something a lot deeper than we'll just read Dave Ramsey's Money Makeover book or read, I'll teach you how to be rich. I've read all that stuff. Reading is not the limiting factor here. But I find myself in the past at times incapable of doing something that I know is good, right? And so when I look at my own bad behaviors, there's an avoidance. There's an avoidance of wanting to be face-to-face with, as someone in the fitness industry, not making millions of dollars. There's a procrastination at times. And it's not even things that I can't afford. It's like a toll bill. Like I'll procrastinate paying that because I don't want to be face to face with, something that means I don't have as much money anymore. As I started to list some of these bad behaviors out, here's one that came up. I spend money on my children to show them that they're loved. So instead of saving, I spend it on Kelly and my kids as a way to show love. And that was interesting, right? So it took some introspection. It took some time to get to that point. And so, using that example we said before, hey, say that you took that away from me. Say that you took away the ability to spend money on my kids to create these special experiences and to show them that they're loved. What would I be afraid of if you took that away? I would be afraid that they wouldn't love me. I would be afraid that I didn't have any other way to show them that. Now, look, my childhood wasn't Oliver Twist. I had a great childhood. But that thing I just talked about is exactly what I experienced when I was a kid. My parents did the exact same thing to me. Kelly, who grew up in a wonderful home, parents are still married, she experienced the same thing. So not only was I afraid of that, but I was afraid that I couldn't uphold these expectations that I had for myself, that I inherited from my parents, and yeah, a deep desire to like not feel those things. So if that was the fear and the worry, what was I really good at? I was world class at never feeling any of that. I was world class at never feeling like I was an inadequate father, never feeling like I didn't have enough money, because I just either avoided it or I just flat out didn't think about it. I didn't want to feel those things, so I did everything that I could to never feel those things. And just recognizing that was really helpful. But then I took it one level deeper, and we talked earlier about like the dreaded image. And I had in my head, I had this stupid ass, no offense, mom and dad, I had this stupid ass little box that had 3 portions, and I would get money for chores. And I had one for spending, one for tithing, and then one for saving. And my parents lorded over me with this stupid box to make sure I put the money in there. And I hated it. I hated everything about this. And I think even a deeper commitment I have to myself is to never feel that same pressure around money that I did when I was a kid. And so I just told myself that I'll never, ever think about it. Now, getting to that level mean that there was a hidden commitment. I was committed to enjoying myself. I was committed to never feeling like my parents' child. I was committed to never feeling like an inadequate provider. And I was committed to never letting other people find out. Now, the big assumptions there is that, and even as I say this stuff, it's like it sounds so stupid, but I just want to take you through a personal thought process that even as I say these things, it's like, man, I can test that very easily. I assume that if I thoughtfully spent, I would be miserable. Like that was a deep, unconscious thought in my mind. I assumed that if I did anything that was modeled in my childhood, that I would become my parents. And my parents are great. But as a kid, it's like you want to set off on your own trajectory, your own journey. And then a big one is that I assume that everybody else manages money perfectly, and I'm the only one that likes to spend money. And the one that was probably the deepest is I assume that my kids won't love me unless I spend money on them. And that's the one that I tested that had the greatest result. First, I had to come up with a list of things that didn't cost money that I thought would be valuable to them. And it turns out, the list is very long. It turns out, when I asked Kelly, whose dad was very successful, what are the things, she said in the podcast right here, what are the things that you valued the most? She didn't mention trips. She didn't mention any gifts. She mentioned time. She mentioned attention. She mentioned love. And those things, I mean, I guess you could say that time is money and that costs something, but those things, turns out you don't have to go to TCBY for. Turns out you don't have to go to the toy store for. And that process right there changed my life.
I used to do the same thing.
Yeah, with money?
Yeah. So I grew up with, my parents made plenty of money, but had a scarcity mindset around it. And
Yeah.
things would get tight.
Yeah.
It was very well communicated. Hey, it's peanut butter and Frosted Flakes this week. And I'd give them credit because they made fun with it. Like, it was like, oh, yeah, we're eating popcorn, but why are we only eating popcorn? Like, now I look back, I'm like, we had no money. Yet, the next month, my mom would roll up in a brand new Lexus that she just leased. And I'm like, wait, I need soccer cleats, but we didn't have any money for it. But now you have new wheels in the driveway. But taking that into my marriage, and especially in the first couple of years, I was the same way. It was like when rent would come out, when we had to think about rent, it was like, there's under $1,000 in there. We need to lock it down. We're survival mode. But I would still find a way to like get Sophia something to make sure, like, to make it seem like everything was good.
Mm-hmm.
She literally could not care less.
Yeah, even asking your spouse is like, and I got another little story that's not money related, but it's spousal related. Even just like spelling that big assumption out to them, they can throw that thing in the trash can really quick. Hey, I'm afraid that if we do this, this is how you're going to feel. And they're like, what?
Yeah.
Years have gone by without ever bringing that up. And when you finally bring it up, you realize it was never an issue in the first place.
Yeah.
It was
So
never an
much
issue in the first
smaller
place.
than you realize when you actually just
So much smaller.
verbalize something to somebody else.
How do you think that relates, like, going back to Jennifer, like, you give these little things so much power. Like, I don't know why I'm thinking, you ever seen the Instagram page, Nature is Metal?
Oh, yeah.
Dude, there was one, I can see if I can go back and find it, but there were these dudes scaling an iceberg. It was just floating, and apparently it's a thing to, like, surf down them, and you, like, glide into the water with these kayaks, and so they
Wow.
were going up, and it got to a point where this thing started tipping over. It was, like, just enough weight,
The iceberg?
the whole iceberg,
Oh,
and it
wow.
was crazy because, your analogy, you could see, like, how much more was below than what you could see up top. And this thing just straight up flipped on him. And I'm wondering with your analogy if the fear-based is if there's anything else added to what I feel safe with, if my whole world is just going to flip upside down on top of me. Because it seems like insecurity rooted in a bunch of different things that ultimately they want to remain in control of because they probably feel safe with these assumptions.
Yeah. Somebody that I really respect, he said, hey, nobody's special, but we're all unique.
Mm.
And to put that in this context, the reasons that someone would be afraid are finite, right? Fear of not being good enough, fear of somebody getting hurt, fear of not being loved, fear of abandonment. All these things, they're not special. And if we whittle all this stuff down, like most of the time, that's what's going to come up. But what's unique is how they got there from the beginning, and what parts of their biography led them to that. And so your story, even though we may get to something that like all of humanity has as a part of their depravity, the way that you got there is going to be uniquely yours. And I think that's why it's so interesting to be a coach, is because you may have some strong assumptions about how this is going to look, but you have no idea. Like, I had no idea that she was going to say that stuff. And it was beautiful. So the question's what? Like, why do we make those things so much bigger?
Yeah, it's like, what is it about adding something new where you know it's the right move?
Mhm.
It's like when your car, all 4 tires are flat, and you show up to get new tires, and you're like, I have to be able to drive, but
Mhm.
you're in there to get tires, and then you're like, no, I can ride on the rims for a little bit longer. Like, what is it about that? Is it the cost? Is it, what if the tires aren't going to last long enough? What if they, what if I have another blowout right after I get new ones? Like, what is it about the adding this seemingly simple activity to your day-to-day?
Mhm.
Is it like the fear of like not being good at it because you're already really good at these other things? Because in a sense, it's like very vulnerable to
Mhm.
like, I'm out of shape. I'm getting back into fitness. I used to do fitness,
Mhm.
but like I know I'm gonna be really, really sore and probably not coordinated like I used to be. Is it the fear of it, the insecurity of like being judged, or?
I want to think that every time. So what do we do with this? Just personally, every time that you see yourself with a set of behaviors that don't match up, there's something underneath that. As soon as you say like, well, I'm not going to replace my tires, I'm riding on the rims. Like, why would I do that? And to use a car analogy, it's like the foot on the gas is the one that you can see. It's like, hey, we're moving forward. This is the thing we need to do. But there's an unconscious foot on the brake. Like every time it's not going the direction that it really should, or there's like resistance there. That's a good way to describe it. There's something going on.
So it's like wanting to remain in control of it.
I think so. And I know for a lot of us, it's like we don't want to feel things that are unpleasant. We're really good. It's like the immune system, right? The immune system isn't something that we see going on and we feel shame for. You know? At least I don't think. You're just like, well, that's my body like fighting something off. And this is like a psychological immune system. It's like a psychological protection against feeling things that don't feel very good. And, you know, the brain's this wildly messy and complicated organ that can hold simultaneous things. I mean, that's a crazy part of the brain, right? The brain can hold simultaneously different concepts at the same time. This is just what we're talking about, right? And the difference between like animals and us, you know, a little kitty can become a cat with all the things that a cat can do, and it doesn't have to like journal about it. But because of these brains that we have, it's not just a process of like becoming. We have to most of the time like deal with all of this stuff that's underneath. And no amount of like David Goggins or, you know, hard work pays off, or, you know, like just do it. Like no amount of that is going to make the least bit of difference if this is going on. The only way to address it is to actually address like what it is. And it's like Peterson says, it's like, hey, you got to go into the cave with where the dragon is. Like you have to do the thing that you don't want to do. But I found that what we've built up in our head, back to what you were saying, especially as it relates to others, and oftentimes that it is, if you can run some little traps, if you can run some little tests, it's not quite as devastating as you think it's going to be. And a real example is that another thing that happens a lot is, you know, two people are married and one person really wants to change and the other does not. It's very common. You know, it's a little bit of what Kelly and I talked about the other day. One person will start to do things that are healthy behaviors and the other person will spiral. It's real. So a couple whose names I won't even like give pretend names for, this had happened over and over again. It was like this broken record where he would decide that he really wanted to lose weight, and she would, as soon as he started changing, start to go into a depressive spiral. And so we went through this whole process, and that was the big assumption that we arrived at. If I start to get healthy, it's going to negatively affect my spouse. And I said, hey, have you ever had a conversation about this? Oh, no. This is not something that we talk about. So have you ever told your wife that this is something that's really important to you and that you're really afraid that if you do this, it's going to result in a strain on your marriage? It's like, no, I've never thought of that. And an example of a behavior that he would participate in and then shut off is he would ask his wife to go for a walk. And as soon as he mentioned that, it was like he was bringing up how she didn't care about exercise. And then she would go into that depressive mode. And then he would not go on a walk. Out of love to her. I mean, how weird and like messy are we as human beings? Like out of love to her, he wouldn't go on a walk because he didn't want to do something that would negatively impact her.
It's a good man.
And this is the conversation that they had with very, very little direction from me. I was just listening and, you know, acting like a kid with these questions. Like, well, why couldn't you talk about that? Oh, what's wrong with walking by yourself? And what he ended up telling his wife is like, I'm so committed to trying to improve that I'm going to go for these walks. And if you want to join me, that's great. But if you don't join me, I'm still going to go for this walk. And my fear is that it's going to put you into this place that isn't good for you. But I've realized that I can't really control that completely. And he said that, and she had a reaction like you think that she would. And then he went on the walk. And he'd never done that before. And then when he got back, he was in a better mood. And when he got back, she was in a better mood. And these two people have lost like 100 pounds between the two of them. And they would tell you today that their relationship's better than it's ever been. I'm not telling you that because I think I had anything to do with it than ask questions. But it was amazing how the thing that he thought was his worst fear, a little bit, and he didn't say it as eloquently as probably we can imagine. I think he stumbled through it. I think it was touch and go for a while. But it wasn't this taboo topic that he had built up in his head that was going to end his marriage. And it turns out it was a good thing.
It's just being afraid of change at the end of the day. Like, all change is going to be scary no matter what. Like with fitness or relationship stuff, like just making those little adjustments that's going to, as an individual, better yourself. But like you said, like with the relationship stuff, like he goes on that walk, the result is he feels better. He goes on that walk, the result is she feels better. They come together. Now it's not in the back of his head that she might be depressed, she might be sad. Like now it's like, now we can have this open dialect or whatever you guys do at the end of the day to unwind, instead of it being this like such tense thing because you're afraid to go walk for 20 minutes or you're afraid to verbalize that to that person, instead of just, you know, like you have to do what's going to be helpful to you. Like you're an individual still, regardless of this partnership that you're in with somebody else. So
yeah, I think that's very another one of those things is like, hey, nobody's special. Something that comes up a lot is I'm not going to like who I become if I do this thing. If I'm overweight and I lose the weight, will people really like me? Because when you're overweight, and these are not my words, this is somebody else. When you're overweight, you know why people are judging you. If you're in great shape and people still don't like you, how are you going to deal with that? You got nothing to come back to. That happens a lot.
it's the fear of the unknown.
It's deep down, I'm not going to have any excuse why I'm not worthy of love. And that's wild.
It's like the big person that you, like the person you just said, someone who is overweight, like they, in the back of their head, they think everyone hates them. They think everyone thinks that they're calling them fat or look at this, look at that. And he has no idea what they're thinking about. And I feel like everybody can kind of relate to that in some way. You probably walk, like I walk into a room and I see 20 people turn their head and I freak out inside. Like, what are they thinking about me? And
Yeah.
It's like no one
Yeah.
can give two shits what you look like. No one cares about what you're doing. Like
They're not
they're not thinking
thinking about
about you as much as you probably realize it. And then
unless you have a booger in your nose.
like a lot of those changes, like if you do lose the weight, they're gonna like you. Like maybe the weight's not the issue. Like if they still hate you after you lost the weight, maybe that's not the problem. You know, like there is. It's like what you've been saying. Like there is a deeper level to go than just my appearance, or like when you mentioned Jennifer earlier, like putting on that clothes to go get that attention. Like it doesn't matter. That stuff doesn't matter. It's kind of
Yeah, it's deep. There's a, I don't know why I know this. There's a French philosopher,
What's his name?
Jean-Paul Sartre.
Can you say it in French accent?
Sartre, S-A-T-R-E. He said that hell is other people. And he had this thought experiment. It's like you're walking through an empty mall and you think it's empty. And then you see somebody looking at you. What do? And then you turn and you realize it's a mannequin. Every human being did something when they thought that was a real person. And part of that is just, I think, biologically how we're wired, right? Like we're to the deepest part of our DNA, we're wired to be socially acceptable creatures. And at some point in our biography, something happened, true or false, but something happened where we told ourselves that the moral of that story is that we weren't. And that's deep, right? That's in the
Where do you
limbic
think that comes
system.
from? Is that like conditioning from your parents? Like the would you say it's the fear of being misunderstood?
I think
'Cause, like I think about my son
Mhm.
who's just getting he'll be 3,
mm-hmm.
and I had to unlearn a lot of parenting skills and tactics that I inherited from my parents. It was listen to me the first time and just do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm holding him to an expectation that adults can't even follow,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then my wife, as gracious and patient as she is, she was like, hey, what if you tried to understand him and where he's coming, like level with him before trying to fix him? Because what you're doing is you're trying to just make it more convenient for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like the biggest aha moment for me. And I would say probably a month ago, all of the inconveniencing paid off because he got in the car after I picked him up and he goes, I'm frustrated. And I was like, okay, what are you frustrated about, bud? Someone took a toy from me and they bit me at school. And I was like, okay, well, what did you do? He's like, I took it back. I was like, hell yeah, good for you, buddy. But also, like, I've never heard you express how you feel before, and it makes me think of Jennifer as like you build up these like stories of why you think you are the way you are, why you have these roadblocks,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't even verbalize how or why you feel these ways about them. And for me, like I have someone who's very close to me. I see him parent, and it's the exact opposite about how we parent.
Mhm.
And that's the golden rule, is like you never tell somebody else how to parent, because I don't have it figured out either. But I see the results that he gets from his child, and it's always first name, middle name, look me in the eyes, say yes, sir. And it's like a dictatorship, and they have zero respect for each other.
Mm.
And it's like that's you see where that goes. And it's like, yeah, you want to feel close to this person that you created, but like you're not talking to him and cultivating a way where he can even understand or manage his emotions. And like, what does that look like in his 20s or in his 30s if you continue down this path? Like you're shaping a being that's not emotionally intelligent, and then they get into the workplace and they're just mad because they're mad. They don't even know why, or they're overweight from all of these other things, or they're severely underweight from these things, and they can't even put it into words. Like, do you think that starts at a young age?
Well, let's test that big assumption. And the assumption is, hey, everybody that has a tough childhood, do they grow up to have problems? And the answer is no. Everybody that had a great childhood, did they get out of jail free? The answer is no. And so I think regardless of what your upbringing looked like, sure, we could say that there's a set of circumstances that would be a much harder set of circumstances to overcome. But I don't think that one can demand the other. And so you could say, hey, nobody gets out of childhood without some messed up story in their head. And so why is that? Well, it's because we're not taking this thing that's fuzzy and unclear and we're trapping it on paper. We're not at 8 being like, hey man, let's go have coffee. Let's go have coffee and work this out, right? There's no platform, there's no even opportunity to do that. And a lot of times, back to kids, it's like I'll ask my kids like, hey, what are you feeling? And every time I do that, it's a good question to ask, but every time I ask that, I'll be like, how the hell do they know? I don't even know how I'm feeling half the time.
Yeah.
And so this thing, it's hard, and it's there because as it's happening, I don't even think that we know it's happening. I hadn't thought about that money box in 35 years. So how was I supposed to know what type of impact that would have when it was there? So I think, you know, as best as we can do, we realize like, hey, these things that happen to you, they're going to creep up. I think look for any inconsistencies that are happening in your own behavior and then someone else. If that's the case, chill. Don't be like, come on, man, you really need to try harder. It's like, okay, there's something going on. What could it be? And then, you know, you take your Speedo off, you put your scuba gear on, and you start clearing. And you just go a little deeper and be like, that's interesting. Go a little deeper. Ooh, I'm feeling it. Like in my gut. Oh, that feels really uncomfortable to write that down. It feels really uncomfortable to say that out loud. Probably on the right track. And I feel like being a self-actualized adult just means that you have to constantly be checking in to deal with that stuff. But it doesn't mean, yeah, I think there's things that we inherit from our parents, good and bad. I think it's a natural maturation to want to potentially do things differently than your parents did, good or bad. It's just different, right? It's not like, hey, you sucked, I'm great. It's like, hey, I want to forge out on my own path. I mean, I feel like that's a natural stage of being an adult. And
You gotta just like figure out with your, like with talking about the stuff you said about your parents. Like I had this conversation with you. Like Caleb was here. Like you kind of realize like no matter what you feel like was really shitty growing up, or you know, you might think it was really that bad. You just got to kind of realize like everybody's parents, I feel like you guys as well, like you're doing the best that you know how to do. You're not really, there's no guide to life. There's no guide to parenting. There's no guide to anything. It's just kind of, you're doing the best that you know how to do, and then being able to kind of verbalize those things. You realize that a lot of it is kind of silly. I remember we had that conversation here, and some of the stuff that I would say out loud that like my dad had said to me was like, just kind of sounds dumb. Not sounds dumb, but it's like, that's the best he knew how to do. That doesn't need to define me. And the way that I go about things now doesn't need to be reflective of what happened in the past. Like things change. Like he did the best he could. Like you don't really need to, oh, they told me I was a failure, this, that. Like maybe he thought that was really going to motivate you. Maybe he was coming from a really good place and you don't know, you might not ever know. And it's just kind of dealing with that and progressing forward with yourself and being able to realize like the older you get, like I'm barely figuring this out now, but like the older you get, that everything you're kind of afraid of really isn't as scary. It's more just kind of, it's new, it's different. Like it's stepping into a gym. You've never stepped into one before. It's going to be different. It's going to be probably, might be shitty. It's going to be fun, but it's going to be scary. Like you guys have a kid for the first time. I don't have a kid. I have a dog. So I don't know how that feels, but I would imagine it's probably scary. It's
They're
probably
not that far off, man. You got to take that thing.
I say when the last episode we had with Chad, and he was talking about you train Trek to catch that frisbee every week since then. Sonny and I go out in the backyard. I tell him sit. I change it from 5 seconds to 10 seconds to 15 seconds, and he waits. And then I throw the ball. I say go. Slowly gets it every week, and it's like there's like the little bit of change. Like think about it from a dog's perspective. He wasn't afraid of it. He wasn't afraid of any change. He just knew if I wait, I get that ball. Kind of like with all the goals you set in your life, you kind of not necessarily wait, like you still have to make stuff happen, but when you kind of verbalize it out loud and you hear the things that you're telling yourself in your head that your brain is telling you are negative, you kind of realize they're kind of stupid, and it's not as deep or it's not as serious as you're probably making the whole situation out to be.
At what age does that fear kick in? Because like I don't know why I just thought of this, but how many times have you been to a playground with your kids and you see a lot of them try to go up the slide the wrong way? An adult, like that scares me. I'm like, I'm gonna fall. But what is it about a kid? They can just try to run up a slide with zero fear, knowing that they're not getting up there. Maybe some of them, depending on your shoes. But like, when does that stop? Because I feel like that's kind of the point of what we're getting as, like starting something new or trying something different. They don't look at the slide and think, well, I probably shouldn't do this because I'll fall backwards and hit my head. They're like, let's see if it works. Let's see if I can get up to the top with all the other kids trying to slide down simultaneously. Like, what happens to, I guess, like where we self-limit or we self-edit?
You know, I won't answer this in like from a, you know, clinical perspective or research, but just having kids, I noticed that when we read books, they could handle things conceptually that were above their pay grade. So we could read things that I remember as a kid like scaring me to death. And I'm reading it. I was like, all right, here we go. Example, because it's Christmas Carol. Jacob Marley and the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come scared the ever-living crap out of me as a kid. But I didn't read the book. I watched all these movies. Went to a live play. So I think for kids, like the concept of being imperfect, it takes time for that to set in. And when they're young, there's no, it's abstract. Even if you talk about it, as we read about it, like it just doesn't sink in. But even with movies, like we'll watch something, and now this is wild. It's movies that they have seen, and there are parts like the rodents of unusual size in The Princess Bride, like the eels. Have y'all seen that movie? Clear your calendar. You only watch it this weekend. Little parts of the movie where I remember as a kid, I was like, "Oh man, this scared me." And I'm watching them; they're like this, nothing. But as they get older, it starts to scare them more. As they see the world as this imperfect place where things are harder, things become scarier to them, and that's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. And it's, you know, like I said earlier, it's like beautiful at the same time where they'll say like, hey, I don't really want to watch that part. It's like, okay, I'm learning at the same time that they're learning. I'm learning that and I thought it was going to be the opposite. I thought they'd be really scared as kids and then they get braver as they got older. But like as they get older, they're becoming aware of what life's really like. Like they're becoming aware that it's scarier and it's harder and it's more real than they just imagined when they were a kid. And so back to what you said before, and we talked about this a little bit with Kel, you know, I feel like my responsibility is not to demand respect from them or be like, you know, look me in the eye when I'm talking to you, but it's just to meet them exactly where they're at and encourage them. I mean, literally to infuse them with courage, not in a naive way like the kid going up the slide where it's like, I don't know what could happen. But it's like, hey, you know exactly what's going to happen, and we're still going to do it. And that's, it's like the coolest part of being a parent.
Agreed.
Yeah.
What's the call to action for all the potential Jennifers out there? Because it seems like, I mean, obviously we've been talking behavior the majority of the time and just like the relationship with our behavior, just like with our thoughts. So, I mean, you helped her understand, and like, what do you encourage other coaches out there who are starting to jump on this same journey of not trying to fix people, but rather understand them and help this potential client understand themselves so that they can be on the long journey, the long road ahead?
Man, for the Jennifers,
Shout out to all the Jennifers.
Shout out to all the Jennifers. I would want you to hear that there's nothing wrong with you. That what you've done has been an incredibly effective way to keep yourself safe. But now that thing that has kept you safe is getting in the way of who it is that you potentially could be. And who you potentially could be is somebody that can handle the things that you've been scared of. And this process of discovery, this process of an inquiry can take as long as you want, but it's not going to be found with more willpower or more vision boards or more people telling you to suck it up. And once you can wrap your head around there, I think that you can change your beliefs. That's a beautiful thing about being an adult versus a dog. You know, like you can change the way that you think about something. And once you do that, then this thing that you think is impossible is not quite as hard as you think. To the coach, man, be willing to go deep. Like you can't, and that's the thing I would want to end with. You can't force somebody to answer these questions, but you can sit across the table. You can take deep breaths. You can be really interested in what they're saying. You can ask follow-up questions of what they're not saying. And you can just let them know that, like, hey, you're somebody that can be trusted. And if you do that, I think that you as a coach can feel a lot more successful. I wish somebody had told me this 15 years ago. It would have saved hours of me banging my head up against the wall, hours of me being cynical, hours of me feeling like I wasn't good at my job when I realized it was just a different skill set. Scene.